こんにちは。おはようございます。こんばんは。Wherever you may be in the world. So let's get started. I posted a link in the chat to the Google Doc I'm going to use for today's lesson. So if you want to, I would recommend you go there so you can follow along. Okay. Alright. Surely create a checklist for myself of all the things I have to do. I made a note to create a note. It's good to know. Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for watching. Today we're going to be looking at verbs in a bit more depth, just finish off kind of what we were doing last week. Verbs, of course, is a very big topic, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to do with verbs that it's not that it's not worth doing them now. I mean, anything you can learn with Japanese, it's going to help you at some point. But there are definitely more practical things to learn first before we learn some other things. So we're going to finish off with what's called the volitional form. Really, it's just a way of saying shall we or let's do this thing, right? Shall we go eat? Let's go to the park, or something like that. So this is kind of continuing on our theme of when we're talking about how to invite people to do things or to come with us or to meet at a certain place. You know, you can use this volitional form to involve people. So we're going to be looking at that in a bit of detail. We'll also be doing a bit of revision, basically, doing a bit of practice on the earlier stuff, so all the pre-verb stuff, and also a bit of revision on the verbs as well. So we'll do two different parts of revision. So I run private lessons. You can see the details here. This is the online prices. I also tutor in person if you live in WA, and you can just go to my Gumtree ad here for all the details. So I'd really encourage anyone to just email me if you want to know some more details. I'm always happy to talk about it. Okay, so let's have a bit of a revision of what we did last week. So we kind of forayed back into verbs. So I did a lesson on this quite a while ago, mainly to do with the particles. You can go watch that video. Alright, I've just saved that in the playlist. It's one of my first videos, so be kind. I don't know if I've improved a whole lot. I feel more confident, but I don't know if I've improved that much. But I guess if we're going to start with verbs, we need to have a bit of a refresher on our Hiragana chart. Okay, so we came out with saying, well, there are two main groups of verbs. There are verbs that we call ru verbs and verbs that we call u verbs. Okay. Now, some of you, if you've done some Japanese study in school before, you may know these as Group 1 and Group 2 verbs, and then I guess there's also Group 3 verbs, which are just the exception verbs. Okay, so I got a bit of a list here, and we went through, well, how do we tell if it's a ru verb or an u verb? What I kind of concluded with is the best way is you just make the muss form, and then once you've made the muss form, that'll tell you if it's a ru verb or a nu verb. And again, go back and watch my video if none of that made sense at all to you. Because it's kind of important to be able to, well, I wouldn't say it's kind of important, it's very important to be able to quickly tell what group a verb belongs to before you go much further. Because a lot of these changes we're going to look at, so past form, volitional form, all these things are going to involve making a change to the verb based on whether it's a ru verb or an u verb. So you have to be able to look at a verb and very quickly say, hey, is this a rue verb or an u verb? Because otherwise when you apply the rule, if you apply the wrong one, it's just going to be a nonsensical word that Japanese people aren't going to understand. Okay, but generally it's very easy to tell if it's an u verb because it ends in pretty much anything but ru. So what we found out last week is that really it's only the verbs that end in ru that we have to make a distinction of, because these could be a ru verb or an u verb. Whereas other verbs we looked at in this list, like this one, hanasu, the fact that it ends with a su just tells you automatically it must be an u verb. But this one, miru, we can't tell. It could be both. So then we have to follow this process. Okay, so another very important thing we can now do once we know this ru verb, u verb distinction is we can start making the negative. So if we say eat, we're now saying won't eat or don't eat. Okay, and all we have to do is we notice for ru verbs, it's always pretty simple. We just have to drop that ru, and then we do this change. In this instance, it's adding this word nai. Okay, now really keep this word in mind, nai. You should kind of be recognizing it as coming up quite a lot when we're dealing with negatives. So for example, when we deal with, why is that shaking the camera? Have to fix it later. We'll have to keep this nai in mind because, for example, when we think of nouns, when we make them negative, for example, gakusei, this word for student, we say gakusei janai. Okay, so we've got the nai in there to say it's a negative of, student, so not a student. And when we talk about na adjectives, for example, genki, we say genki janai. Again, we can see this nai coming in. And when we talk about our adjectives, our i adjectives, for example, oishii, which means delicious, we say oishikunai. Okay, so we see pretty much every single type of word in Japanese, when we do the negative, they end in nai. Then we have that special rule for u verbs that end in the u hiragana. We just replace it with wa and add nai, so kawanai is a really common one here, so don't buy. But any verb that ends in u, so au, to meet, awanai, don't meet. And then all the other u verbs, we have to do a bit of a tricky thing with this hiragana chart, but we basically make it to the a vowel equivalent. So again, I would really recommend you watch last week's video because I go through this in a fair bit of detail. Anyway, we're going to do some practice of it today. And then we have our two exception verbs. So these are always exception verbs: suru, to do, and kuru, to come. And we see that you just have to memorize these, so shinai, konai. And then just for this conjugation only, so the negative conjugation, aru becomes nai. And then this should again pop out. You go, hey, wait a minute. You're telling me that nai is just a word in and of itself? Yeah, it means the opposite of to exist, to not exist, which is why we have it on the edge. It's no coincidence that we have it on the end of all our verbs, adjectives, and nouns. Alright. Now the other big thing that we learn about with our verbs is what's called the muss form, and particularly the verb stem. Alright, this verb stem is a really important step to unlocking a lot of the conjugations in Japanese. So how do we do it? Well, again, we have to say, is it a ru verb or is it an u verb? So ru verbs, we just drop the ru, so we just end up with tabe. And for u verbs, now we have to replace that last u vowel sound with the I vowel equivalent. So iku in this instance, the ku becomes a ki. Alright, if we just look at our hiragana chart, and iki. Okay, and our exception, suru becomes shi, kuru becomes ki. Alright, I'll just make this a bit bigger. Bigger. Way too big. Okay, so how do we get to this muss form, alright, this polite form that perhaps a lot of you will be familiar with? Well, we just add muss to our stem. So we saw the stem up the top was tabe, tabe muss. Okay. And then if we want to make the negative, well, we add masen to the stem. Kai masen. Alright. And intentionally here I've used a ru verb or an u verb But actually this distinction doesn't matter anymore, because once we've made the stem, the result is kind of independent of ru verbs and u verbs. So I just have a whole bunch of muss forms. Okay, this next thing I looked at, verb as a target, I think this is definitely conceptually hard for a few people. So don't be concerned if you don't understand this straight away. I think this is one of these conjugations where you kind of realize you do all these things in English and you don't even realize you're doing them. So for example, when you say I'm going to eat dinner, you're conveying that you're not eating dinner basically where you're standing. You're having to leave and move somewhere else. So generally the implication is you're going out to eat food, but just keep in mind that you probably don't even think when you put that word go in there. But just like it happens in Japanese, they say iku. Alright, and then they use this ni particle to say, well, I'm going to eat. Alright, so they join the two verbs like that. And so this is a very, very, very common way to talk in Japanese. You'll see there's a massive use of iku and kuru, these go and to come verbs, when they get combined with other verbs. Okay, and the last thing we looked at before we wrapped up last week was this want to do a verb. Okay. Guess this should not be in italics. I mean, I guess I should really say this is X because it doesn't necessarily have to be do, but to do is kind of our default verb. Alright, so we just want to remember this word tai, basically. Want to remember tai. So when you hear this word tai, you want to think want to. Want to or want to do kind of thing. So all we have to do is we attach tai to the verb stem. Okay, continuing on with our theme of verb stem conjugations. So the other thing we pointed out is that it changes this verb kind of into an e adjective, in a sense that when we make other changes, we follow the e adjective rule rather than the verbs. Now that's not super important yet because we haven't done that many verb conjugations that this might be confusing, but just keep in mind later on it's going to come up. But we see, for example, the negative rule already coming in here. So tabetai, to want to eat, okay, and then tabetakunai, don't want to eat. I just want to point out that these continue on also with the past form, which I know we haven't done, but it's just worth seeing. So the past form for these, for pretty much all the negatives, verbs, adjectives, nouns, is we drop this e and add katta. Okay, tabetaku nakatta. So this is didn't want to eat. Tabetaku nakatta. Okay, but anyway, we'll come across this past form in a whole different lesson, so don't worry about this too much. Okay, that's where we're up to. So, what are we going to look at today? Well, we're going to look at what's called the volitional form. Volitional form. So, it's either let's or shall we do X. Alright, let's or shall we do X. Alright, so how do we do this? Well, I think it's generally, we want to start from the plain form. Okay, want to start with this plain form. And then you'll find that the Muss form is really, really easy in comparison. Alright, so where do we start? Well, for ru verbs, we drop our ru. Let me just make this a bit bigger actually. We drop our ru. drop that ru and we add yo. Okay, so example we're always going to use taberu, which is to eat. Tabe plus yo, tabeyo. Okay, so let's eat. Or shall we eat? Depending on the context, especially if it's a question or not. Now for verbs, we have to do this thing that we basically always seem to have to do with verbs, which is replace our u vowel sound with the o vowel equivalent. Alright, so let's have a quick look at our Hiragana charts. Let me just take 1 second. Hiragana chart. Alright, we'll just look at this. Okay, I think that's working now. Okay. Alright, so we'll look at our Hiragana chart. Okay, so remember that the rule said replace the u vowel sound with the o vowel equivalent. Alright, so this bit here, replace the u vowel sound with the o vowel equivalent. So what does that mean? Well, so we look in our u column, okay? This is where we must be starting because we're dealing with plain form verbs. And again, if this seems really confusing, I would highly recommend you look back at last week's video and my Introduction to Verbs video, the very first one in the playlist. And pretty much just watch those until the sentence I just said makes sense. Because trust me, you're probably not going to get too far in this topic if you can't understand that part. It's not like that's going to become clearer later and then you can continue your learning. It's really best to just spend the time on it now and try and get it. Having said that though, I used to find it used to take me about 3 months for some of these concepts to sink in, and I went to Japan on exchange, so I was surrounded by it 24/7 and it would still take time. But anyway, so we look at our u verb column, and then what do we have to do? Well, we had to change it to the o vowel equivalent. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, if the example that we have in the worksheet is it's iku. Okay, so we're dealing with ku. What's the o vowel equivalent? Well, we stay in the same row. We go to our o column. Okay, so we end up with ko. So we're just kind of going from the middle to the end column. And if it was tsu, we would end up with to. Example. Alright, we just keep changing. So what does that mean in this situation? Well, we have iku, replace the ku with ko. Should remember the shortcut for this. Yeah. Okay. And then we add u, so we get equal. Equal. Alright. Now if we look, actually I don't have them there anymore, but if we consider other verbs, so for example, hanasu. Alright, hanasu would be hanaso. So talk becomes let's talk, or shall we talk. Matsu, which is to wait, would be mato. That's wait, or shall we wait. Okay, but we're going to see that with this volitional form, there tends to be verbs that pop up time and time again that commonly get put into volitional, and other ones not so much. Alright, so what about our exceptions? Well, as always, our suru and kuru are our exception verbs. Just put this on the page. Oops. Oh no. Alright, so suru becomes shio and kuru becomes koyo. Okay? Again, we've got our ko popping its head up when it's kuru. Alright. So that's the plain form. So what do we have to do for polite? Well, it's very simple, actually. Much simpler than what we just did. Alright, so for all verbs, we just attach a musho to the end. Okay, to the verb stem, I guess I should say. attach masho to the verb stem. So we had tabe as our verb stem before, tabe masho. Iki, okay, remember our stem, we're going to the e vowel equivalent sound for u verbs. So iki masho. Let's go. And our verb stem, even though it's an exception verb, because I want to point out that it doesn't matter for any of these verbs. As soon as we're dealing with the verb stem, and we've made the verb stem, the distinction between ru verbs and u verbs is not important anymore. It is important to make the verb stem, but after making the stem, it doesn't count anymore. So we'll see we've got a ru verb here, an u verb, and an exception verb, but it doesn't matter. We just add masho to that stem every time. Okay. Alright. Alright, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to look at for verbs right now. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, so let's look at some revision. Let's have a bit of practice. Alright, so here's our first question. Okay, so I've done this. Let's do one more page. I've done this in JLPT style. I believe I've done some tests like this before on the stream, but if you're not familiar with JLPT, I've done a video on it before. But basically it's just a multi-choice proficiency test for Japanese. And definitely I would say it's the thing which helped my Japanese improve the most, I guess, after going to Japan for a year. Just the way it really forces you to learn so much that's in depth about grammar in particularly, it really improves your Japanese. But anyway, our English translation for, by the way, there's no English in JLPT, this is a bit of a helper, I gotta say. But let's not worry about that. So we've got this. So we've got eiga, we've got our blank, and miru. So what will go here? Now the English is telling us watch movie. Alright, so eiga is movie, and miru is to watch. So what are we going to put in here? Well, we've got ga, o, ni, and de. Alright, so what would your answer be? And really the key to doing well in this JLPT style any multi-choice is like this. Before you even read the answers, you want to have you want to try and guess the answer just from the question. And then you want to try and eliminate obvious wrong answers. It cannot always be obvious that something is wrong, but you want to try and eliminate wrong answers, because then you're increasing your chances quite substantially if you're only having to pick between two that you're not sure of, for example. So where would we go with this? So the correct answer is o. Alright, so I would look back at my very first video on verbs if you're unsure of how to get the answer here. But we have a verb and a noun. And when we want to say that this verb acts directly on this noun, so watch the movie or watch a movie, we're going to be dealing with o, this direct object particle, whenever we have this kind of situation. Alright. What about our next one? Alright, we have gohan, something taberu, and we see that this means to eat a rice, or eat rice or a meal. Just remember this word gohan is interchangeable for this word of rice or meal. Technically, literally it means rice, but in Japan this means meal. So how would we do this one? So we would end up with the same answer. Okay, we're going to end up with o, because again we have a noun acting on a verb. Alright. Alright, what do we have now? We have Ri-san, something, hanasu. Okay, and we see it's talk with Ri-san. So this is Ri-san, and we have hanasu, to talk, or to speak. So we have he, o, ni, and to. Now if any of you went for o, unfortunately you're wrong. Okay? In this instance there is a better answer. Now is probably one of these ones that you should be able to say is an obvious wrong answer. So we're ending up with ni or to. But ni is not wrong. I mean you could go with it, but to is the much better answer here. Because remember to, although we looked at it in our kind of complete and partial listing particle, also it can mean and or with. So Ri-san to hanasu, to speak or talk with Ri-san. Alright, next one. So we have shinseki something, au. Alright, so shinseki, I have to go into the memory banks to remember this word, but this is a relative, or relatives, you know, we can't really tell with plurals in Japanese. And then we have au, okay, this is a verb, okay, we can see by our ending here. To meet. So what's this one going to be? Well, ga, to, ni, or de. Alright, so the answer could actually be to or ni. Shinseki to ao, so meet with relatives. Shinseki ni ao. Well, it could be either of these ones. So in JLPT you wouldn't get a question like this, for example. They would only give you one of these two alternatives. So this is why I said it's based on JLPT. Okay. Okay, so we got another one. Gakko something iku. Gakko iku. So what's this going to be? Well, we have gakko, which is school, which is a generic word for school, and iku, which is to go. So again, some of you might go for the or and say, well, we got a verb acting on a noun. This is surely the right answer. Unfortunately, no. Now, it's not going to be ga. This grammatically could be a sentence, but it's basically saying the school is the one who goes. So we're kind of talking about an inanimate object moving itself. So this probably doesn't really work. But or is not going to be any good. De, no, not this one, but it's ni. Okay, so this is where we're talking about ni as our target particle. So we're saying the verb to go, and we've got a school. So it's like, well, what's the target of going? Well, the school. because we're going to the school. Alright, so we're going to see a lot when iku comes up that ni is going to be involved, because ni is our target particle, particularly when we're dealing with a time or a place. And here clearly we're dealing with going to a place. So this is fine. Alright. Alright, so we've got shinseki wa ashita something kuru. Shinseki wa ashita something kuru. We've got e, o, ni, or de. And we see as for our relatives, so as for our relatives, ashita is tomorrow, and kuru, to come. So some of you might think, well, I know air had something to do with motion, so it could be this one. Yeah, it's not a bad guess. We have o, and we might say, oh yeah, we've got a verb and a noun. We got ni, and we got de again. So which one would it be? Which one would it be? Well, it's going to be ni again. Alright, so whenever we come up with iku or kuru, always keep in the back of your mind that ni is always a great candidate. Just realised I haven't been highlighting. Ni is always a great candidate. Okay, now remember air, it does work with motion, but here notice that the two words we're actually joining are tomorrow and coming, not so much the relatives. But here, because it's a time, ni is going to be a really big candidate to be right. Our e does work with motion verbs, but it's more like when the motion is the target. So for example, we say, I send a letter to Japan. I'm going to the park. We don't, with time, we have to kind of fall back on using ni. Alright. So we've got some katakana here. I know we don't see katakana all too often. It's one of those things you just have to practice on your own time. It's not impossible for someone to teach you katakana, but it's much quicker if you just spend the time and learn it yourself. And you just really want to get to a point where if someone says a word to you, you can just write it out. Without thinking. So we've got basu something noru. So what's this one going to be? Well, we've got ga, o, ni, or de. So basu ga noru. Alright, this is incorrect. And it kind of similar how our school one went. It's kind of saying the bus is the one who gets on or rides. So not really what we're going for here. Basu o noru. Alright, so what's happening here? It's kind of like we're getting on top of the bus. Not really though, it's just kind of strange. We've got ni. Alright, so this is the correct answer. Basu ni noru. To get on the bus. Right, it's the target particle, okay? So what's the target of our getting on? Well, it's the bus. Oops. Sorry, that's the wrong button. Wrong button, but similar sub-menu, got me confused. Alright, we've got 3 more. Then we're going to look at our volitional form again. Alright, it's a bit of a longer one here, but we got 映画館 something, 映画を見る. Alright, so I've been kind and I've already given you one of the particles. But we have to work out this. You see, it's watch movie at the movie theater. Now a lot of you, I know your eyes flicked straight here, didn't they? Straight there. Very naughty. Very naughty. What about all the stuff I've told you? Now I want to point out that if we're talking about JLPT here, this kind of question, I would say it's a JLPT N5 difficulty. Okay, N5 is actually the lowest level you can get, so that kind of tells you what kind of level the JLPT is at. I mean, I'm not saying it's above you if you're struggling with this question, but just to point out that you would have to be good with you would have to be very confident with all this material that I'm going through today to consider taking N5. I have not looked actually at the quotes because they basically give you quoted study hours to pass the exam. So it's like whatever 600 hours of full-time Japanese study, all these kind of things. But I think you could go from zero Japanese knowledge to passing the N5 in a calendar year. If you mean these lessons are only an hour a week, I think you'd be struggling to get by just with an hour a week, but you'd have to be doing a lot of self-study. But definitely if you knew all the material that I went through in these lessons very well, you would very likely be doing well in JLPT N5 and you're very likely to pass. But you'd have to be confident with all this material that I set out. Plus, of course, you need to be your listening has to be at a pretty high standard as well, and your ability to read kanji. So you'd have to know, I would say, I mean, to be safe, I always just say learn 300 kanji. Okay, so you're looking at about, and this sometimes makes people feel a bit down, but you want to learn about the same amount of kanji that a year 2 student in Japan would know. So yeah, you learn about 100 in year 1 and 100 in year 2, and then you want to get another 100 on top of that. So you'd be about a year 2 or halfway through year 3 level for a native Japanese person. Okay, but that's quite good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Japanese children, just like any child, they pick up the language pretty well, and by the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old, they're having fluent conversation, of course. So it's not that bad of a comparison when you think of it that way. Alright. Anyway, so what's our answer going to be? Well, it can't be or, because you pretty much never have two ors in a sentence. 映画館が映画を見る? Okay, again, this is kind of saying that the movie theater is the one that watches a movie. It's not really what we're going for here. Okay, so it's going to be de. This is a perfect de question. Alright. So remember, de is our context particle. So it kind of tells us what context does this verb take place in. So 映画館で. So basically we can translate this as by means of. So by means of the movie theater, we watch a movie. Although a lot of people like to translate de as at. Just kind of be careful with this, because ni can be used to mean at as well. So it's, like I said, it's not always good to use English to try and work these out. You want to try and think of, how does this particle work in Japanese? That's the best way to work out what the answer is going to be. But like I said, this is a typical question testing you. Do you know the difference between ni and de? And there is quite a big difference. I want to point that out. Quite a big difference. And again, if you're not comfortable with this, just go back to my previous lessons. I do go through that in a fair bit of detail. Alright. Got this one now. Okay, a bit of a long one. So, 銀行は郵便局の隣に something. Alright, so we got 見る、ある、食べる、行く. So our answers, we've got to look, to exist, to eat, to go. Now, of course, the tricky thing is knowing the vocabulary. So the fact that I've listed all 4 of these, some of you will probably just immediately go here and go, well, this is the closest. And it is the right answer. But notice we're saying, as for the bank, and this sentence I would recommend basically memorizing, because it helps you talk about where stuff is in location to other things. But as for the bank, 郵便局の隣. Okay, so tonari is next to. No is our way to join 2 nouns. So we've got post office and we got next to. 郵便局の隣. So next of the bank. Doesn't always work. But go back to our lesson on the no particle, our basic particles, and to get an idea of this. Yep, and then we're going to say it exists. So remember, Japanese sentences we can read backwards. So there is, next to, the post office, the bank. Okay, so add it. Alright, last one. Last one. Yeah, so right click menu there. Interesting. Anyway, last one. We have shigoto, something, isogashi ga o ni de. Alright, so some of you might point out, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute, there's no actual verbs in here. Why are we even dealing with this? Well, I mean, I guess it's because when we looked at particles, I kind of called them verb particles, but we saw, at least with when we're dealing with ni, that this can happen with, we can use this with nouns and adjectives as well. And de and ni are like this. Ga as well, I guess. So just keep in mind that these aren't necessarily strictly only verb particles. But we've got shigoto, which is work, isogashi, which is busy, and we're saying busy with work. Now, don't get me wrong, you could say shigoto ga isogashi. Alright, this is a perfectly grammatically fine sentence, and again, JLPT wouldn't give you, by the way, the answer is this one. JLPT would not give you ga and de in this type of sentence. It's too... they would have to give you maybe some kind of dialogue so you can tell, but they're both possible answers, but not when we combine it with this English translation, which again is not in JLPT, which is why I'm able to do this. But we say it's busy with work, alright? And this is the big clue, by means of work. But we're using our de, okay? Shigoto de isogashi. So by means of work, isogashi, I'm busy. Okay. Alright, so I just want to quickly look at some, what is basically called marketing. I mean, it's, I understand that it's marketing. I mean, it's, I mean that we look at these things when we're dealing with marketing, I guess I should say. How am I going to... it's not really displaying, that's annoying. Didn't really test this beforehand. Alright, that'll have to do. See how this goes. Alright. on stream. Wait, did I switch it? No, that's why. Alright, there we go. Okay. So this is an example of why we learned this volitional form that I alluded to earlier. Okay, obviously it's really important to be able to say, let's go do this, let's do this, shall we do this kind of thing. So important, we're inviting people out to do stuff. But the other major usage that this volitional form gets in Japanese is its usage in marketing. Just wonder if I can make this. Yeah, it's not much better. Anyway, so we see this is a toy car company. Alright, it's called Tomica. Tomica. Alright, and they do a big brand in Japan. I think they also export. I'm actually not sure. Anyway, it's a toy car manufacturer. We see there's a Tomica factory, Inc. But what this is actually talking about is the Tomica, and then this kanji here on the right is from Hakubutsukan, which Hakubutsukan is a museum. Okay, so it's like the Tomica Museum, and it's in Nagoya. Okay, this is written in English, of course. Love their English. But we see here, this says, actually, just let me, can I do it so that it's, how does that look? That's probably a bit better. Yeah. It's a bit stretched, but at least it fills the whole screen. And so down the bottom here we see it says Tomica in Nagoya. Okay, and we see it says Yokoso, which is welcome. Okay, so you see this a lot in marketing. And then we see it says Atarashi Tomica Town e. Okay, so Atarashi is new. This is an adjective we saw before. Tomica Town. Okay, so this ta, u, and n. This is the English word of town. So Tomica Town, I don't know what this is. I'm guessing it's like this little scale version of maybe a Japanese city or something made out of, using Tomica and all the buildings and things like that. And we see we've got e. Alright, we've got our e particle on the end here. And let me just plug this in real quick. E, we saw, is our directional particle, I guess we could say. It's kind of this weaker version of ni, sorry. And we don't actually have to have the verb at the end because, it's used pretty much only with motion verbs. So it's implied that it's saying here go or come, alright? But here it's basically saying go. Now, this is the top part that I actually want to focus on though for our volitional thing, okay? So in marketing, we're going to always be seeing advertisements which basically say, hey, let's go here, or come here, or, that kind of thing. So it's kind of encouraging you to go. So we're often going to see this volitional form of to go, alright? Now, if we go back to our sheet, past it. Okay, it's this stuff, alright, our volitional form. So we drop the ru and add your for our ru verbs, but this is what we're actually dealing with, an u verb. Okay, so we have iku, so we get the ku, change it to the o vowel equivalent, and add u, iko. Right? And that's what we can see here. Let's go to Tomica. The kojo, right, which is the factory. So Tomica no kojo, so Tomica's factory. Ni, okay, remember we're using our ni with our target, basically our whenever we're traveling somewhere to a location. So in this instance, the Tomica factory, we're going to there. So ni iko. Let's go. Alright, so that's one example of some marketing. And I've got another one here. I'm gonna have to work out a better way to do this. It looks kind of strange. Okay, but we see this one. I know it's a bit stretched. Sorry about that. But it's this is from JR. Okay, so JR is short for Japan Rail. Actually, what if I do this? Is this better? Yeah, looks alright. Yeah, okay, so from JR, Japan Rail. And here we've got a sakura no ki. Sakura no ki. Alright, so a sakura, cherry blossom tree. And we've got a bit of a traditional Japanese looking building here. Kind of looks like a castle. Kind of looks like, I really don't want to say because I know I'll be wrong, and someone who's knows more about Japan than me will probably correct me. Anyway, it does look like a building you would find in traditional Japan. But it says Soda Kyoto Iko. Okay, so this is, I just want to point out, this kind of harkens back to our male-female speech I did a few lessons ago, so go review that if you're unsure of what I mean when I say male-female speech. But it's kind of saying Soda. So it's basically saying, that's right, or yeah, you're right, something like this. So this would be, people wouldn't just say this out of nowhere, right? Someone probably says something like, oh, do you remember how nice Kyoto was when we went this time last year? Or something, okay? And so then you're like, Soda. That's right, Kyoto, and this is a city, actually the original, I don't know if it's the original, but definitely one of the original capitals of Japan, okay, Kyoto. And these characters, Kyo, this means capital city, or capital, and To, this also means city. Okay, so yeah, it's the old capital, and it's near, kind of near Osaka, if any of you know where Osaka is, but it's basically kind of in the middle left of Japan. And if you think of the word Tokyo, you know, Tokyo, the To in Tokyo means east, and the Kyo is this same character. Okay, so east capital. Alright, that's the new name for Tokyo. But anyway, Soda, Kyoto, Iko. Okay, so this is the same one as that Tomica one we just saw. But now it's using the kanji instead, but it's the same word, same verb. So let's go to Kyoto. Okay, and we have our full stop. Alright, so very commonly used in marketing. So this is another reason to be kind of familiar with it. Okay, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. That was, I just like to do these verb sections in little bits because, well, they are kind of complex to do it all in one go. But also got some revision in there. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave comments. Please leave a like, it really does help me out a lot. Please subscribe, because then you get a notification if you're logged into your YouTube account, for example, on your phone. If you subscribe to me, as soon as I go live, you get a notification. And seeing as I go live about 5 to 10 minutes before the lesson starts, it means you can get your morning tea, set it aside and sit down for a good hour of Japanese lessons. I was hoping to talk today about JLPT stats a little bit, but I think I might leave it till next week. Let me just write a note about that actually. Okay, I don't really want to talk about JLPT stats per se. I mean, I do, but it's more a bit of revision for our numbers and for our countries as well. It's going to help out both with those. Okay. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.